Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. A magnitude 8.8 earthquake has struck off the coast of Russia, leading to tsunami warnings across several regions. Japan and Hawaii are among the countries to issue evacuations across coastal regions. Arab nations, including Egypt and Qatar, who have mediated Gaza peace talks, have called for Hamas to disarm and end its rule in Gaza. 17 nations in total, including the EU and Arab nations, have supported a 7-page document agreed at a UN conference on reviving a two-state solution. This comes as British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says the UK will recognise a Palestinian state in September unless Israel takes substantive steps to end what he called the appalling situation in Gaza. President Trump says he did not discuss this plan with Starmer. Ukraine says that 3 soldiers have died after a Russian strike on a training camp in the country. It comes as President Trump confirms that Russia has 10 days before sanctions will be imposed unless progress is made on the war in Ukraine and a peace deal. US officials say that Donald Trump will have the final call on a truce extension in the trade tensions with China. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says both nations will continue talks ahead of a deadline of August the 12th. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump says the Wall Street Journal and its owner Rupert Murdoch want to settle a defamation lawsuit over an article relating to Trump's connection with Jeffrey Epstein. Meanwhile, Trump has spoken about a fallout with the late financier. Sean Diddy Combs is seeking a release on a $50 million bond after being found not guilty of the most severe charges in his sex trafficking trial. Diddy was found guilty on 2 charges of transportation to engage in prostitution. And Australia has added YouTube to its under-16 social media ban ahead of a December rollout. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said on X that protecting children online means taking on some tough problems. But we start this hour as a massive 8.8 magnitude earthquake struck off Russia's far east on Wednesday, triggering tsunami warnings across the Pacific region. The epicenter, about 126 kilometers from Petropavlovsk, Kamchatsky, hit a depth of 18 kilometers. That's according to the US Geological Survey. In Kamchatka, several people were injured, but officials report no serious injuries. The region also saw tsunami waves of up to 3 to 4 meters. While no fatalities have been reported, a kindergarten was damaged. Japan has also issued evacuation orders for coastal areas with waves up to 3 meters expected. The tsunami's first waves reached northern Japan's Hokkaido at 30 centimeters, and higher waves are anticipated. Hawaii and Alaska have also received tsunami warnings, with Hawaii preparing for waves up to 3 meters. Let's listen to Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshimasa Hayashi and hear what he had to say on this matter.
本日8時25分ごろ、カムチャッカ半島付近を震源とするマグニチュード 8.7 の地震が発生いたしました。この地震に伴い、北海道から和歌山県の太平洋側の沿岸に津波警報が発表され、高いところで3メートル程度の津波が予想されております。警報が発表されている地域の皆様は、直ちに高台や避難ビルなどの安全な場所に避難をしてください。現時点で人的物的被害は確認中との報告。
Well, the earthquake was initially measured at a magnitude of 8.7, but was later revised to 8.8. This has been described as one of the strongest tremors to hit the region in decades, with Russian officials reporting a tsunami wave, as previously mentioned, of 3 to 4 meters in the Kamchatka Peninsula. This comes as no fatalities have been reported from Russia. Let's now listen to what the governor of Russia's Kamchatka Krai region, Vladimir Solodov, had to say.
Сегодняшнее землетрясение стало серьезным испытанием для всех нас. Сильнейшие за последние десятилетия толчки мы испытали. Сейчас специалисты, сейсмологи обобщают оценки. Предварительная оценка в диапазоне от 7,7 до 7,9 сил толчков. И объявлена угроза цунами, поэтому еще раз повторяю просьбу отойти от береговой линии в цунами опасных районах, в первую очередь это Халактырский пляж. Уже сейчас, по моему поручению, специалисты приступили к обследованию всех зданий, в первую очередь социальных учреждений. Есть информация, что в 15-м детском саду произошло обрушение стены. К счастью, детей и взрослых в это время в детском саде не было. Предварительно жертв нет, но сейчас уже на место выехали специалисты.
Well, the United States Pacific Tsunami Warning Center has issued advisories for California, Oregon and Washington states. A tsunami advisory has also been extended to Ecuador, which could see waves exceeding 3 meters. As the situation develops, Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has assured the public that relief efforts are underway with a focus on ensuring the safety of citizens in the affected regions. Well, this, of course, a difficult situation. The true extent of the damage is not yet known, but of course bringing you reports of the waves reaching 3 to 4 meters in Russia in the affected areas. A huge 8.8 magnitude earthquake, one of the largest, as we've mentioned, in decades. The warnings have been issued for several regions, with evacuations taking place in Hawaii, in Hawaiian Islands. There are standstills in many of the roads, with people evacuating from lower land towards higher areas. The local authorities there have been urging calm as people make their way from coastal regions of Hawaii. We expect that the tsunami, if it does hit, could hit in several hours for Hawaii. Japan as well, of course, experiencing the horrific earthquake some years ago, which had huge ramifications, a nuclear site on the coast which was impacted, and there is still radioactive material at that nuclear site, and it is, of course, still undergoing work, but also measures have been put in place. And of course, those waves in Russia, 10 to 13 feet reported in Kamchatka. Currently, waves of around 30 centimeters hitting Hokkaido in northern Japan. These visuals that we are showing you, of course, currently calmer scenes, but that could change. Just to bring you an update from what Hawaii Governor Josh Green has said in his statement, he has asked people to heed evacuation orders, saying that people stay calm and that if you are in low-lying ground, then you must move to higher ground, saying that the impact is expected in a few hours, but that Hawaii is under a full tsunami alert. They're saying we are a couple of hours away. Any impact to Hawaii will take some time, but please pay attention and listen to the advice as it comes. This situation is one we will be continuing to monitor. Just another brief update before we move on. The airport in Kamchatka, which of course it is closer to where, or is at least on the Russian coast, near where this tsunami has hit, and of course where this earthquake has happened. The Kamchatka airport is operating normally after this earthquake. Just a little update for you there. Flights are still ongoing and the runway is in a satisfactory condition. But again, I just want to reiterate the situation is evolving. We do expect landfall for potential tsunamis to come in some time, and here on NewsX World we will bring you all of those updates. But moving on now, and the United Kingdom will recognise a Palestinian state in September unless Israel takes significant steps towards peace. Prime Minister Keir Starmer made that announcement after recalling his cabinet for emergency talks amid the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Reiterating the call for a ceasefire, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said the following.
We need a ceasefire. We need always to keep in our mind the hostages and the atrocity of October the 7th, and they must be immediately released. They've been held a very, very long time. But also we need alongside that to ensure that we get aid in volume and in speed into...
Well, this follows UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy's statements at the UN conference where he declared the viability of the two-state solution. This is what Lammy said.
It is with the hand of history on our shoulders that His Majesty's government therefore intends to recognise the state of Palestine when the UN General Assembly gathers in September here in New York.
While Israel has strongly rejected the plan, calling it a reward for terrorism, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the move punishes victims and could endanger the UK itself. Meanwhile, 17 countries alongside the European Union and Arab League declaration calling for Hamas to end its rule in Gaza and hand over weapons to the Palestinian authorities with international support. Well, joining us to discuss all of these updates, Dr. Wael Awad, a Middle East affairs expert who's joining us live from New Delhi. Dr. Awad, thank you for your time. Let's first look at this statement from Keir Starmer, of course, threatening to acknowledge a Palestinian state. We've seen France already make this promise and make this pledge. Is it actually going to have any difference to the ongoing conflict, given Israel's stance and sort of vision towards their goals, which is to eradicate Hamas, free all the hostages and make sure that October the 7th can't happen again?
Well, I think it's a high time that the British government recognize the mistake they have done or the blunder they have committed against the Palestinians more than a century ago when they have Balfour Declaration. And in that declaration also not only they gave the Israelis the state of recognizing a state of Israel within Palestine, but at the same time they were also recognizing a Palestinian state next to Israeli state. So therefore, if that was the commitment 115 years ago, then why are they not able to implement it, and why now? I think it is a symbolic, it's more of a symbolic that the government of Britain have not been able, neither the government of UK and the rest of the European country, in fact, even in the United States, where people are in a position to close their eyes anymore, to see that this is not a war against Hamas, which they are leading, and that Israel has been deceiving the public for the last 22 months plus of this war, 7th of October, because they were saying militarily they're trying to eradicate Hamas. But now we are seeing a genocide, a different kind of a genocide, a starvation till death or you leave the countries, and therefore they cannot leave the country, so they are dying. And we have every 10 hours, 2 Palestinians are dying, especially children and elderly women, because they don't have food to eat. In addition to the continuous bombardment of the AIDS workers and the AIDS people running for to getting the AIDS. So I think this is a high time where the international community has to recognize there is no way out to settle in the Middle East without two-state solution, and the Palestinians have the full right to have a homeland in their own home, and they cannot be expelled out of their home because Israel believes that it is only a state for the Jew and not for the Palestinians who have been the aboriginal of this land.
Dr. Awad, just to, of course, provide some context from the Israeli side, they say that a genocide is not ongoing, that there is enough aid in Gaza. That refuted by over 100 NGOs, the UN themselves as well. But this situation, of course, it is made more difficult, Dr. Awad, because ceasefire talks have broken down. The US and Israel say that Hamas don't want a ceasefire. What point of this pressure will potentially move towards Hamas, given the fact that Israel did agree to this 60-day ceasefire that was proposed by Steve Witkoff some time ago? A fresh proposal was issued by Egypt, a mediator in these conversations, and Hamas said no to that. Is there any acknowledgement that Hamas need to agree to a deal as well, rather than all of this pressure potentially being on Israel for diplomacy from world leaders?
I think we have to also recognize that the fight against Palestinian is not only Hamas. Hamas is not Palestine, by the way. Hamas is a faction of the Palestinian who resisted occupation, who have a collaboration with Netanyahu over the years, who has been funding their monies with, which is siphoned from outside, and he made enough money for himself. So therefore, Hamas was created as an alternative to the Palestinian Authority. So therefore, if we keep focusing on Gaza strips and blaming Hamas for the ceasefire, actually Hamas from day one wanted this fire to happen, and only on their conditions that they are wanted to have a permanent kind of a withdrawal of the Israelis, permanent stop of the war, and also release of the hostages that they are in their captivity, in exchange of Palestinian prisoners who have been languishing inside the Israeli jails for more than 10 years and 15 years, and some of them are the longest serving persons in Israeli jail. So I think that was a settlement. But because the international community and the media only focus on Hamas and putting the total blame on Hamas, I think it's a high time to see also on the other eyes what's happening in West Bank. If Hamas is seriously in Gaza and creating all this problem for the Israelis, then what's happening in the West Bank? We are having more than 15,000 people have been captured, more than 1,200 has been killed, more than 89 children have been killed in West Bank. Then if that is the situation, then why Israel continue its annexation of the territories of Palestine? I think the main objective of Israel is, and it is now totally exposed, and it has been talked even in the Israeli media, that Israel will not accept any state of Palestine inside Israel or inside the Palestinian territories. Therefore, it's a time that they wanted to expel the whole Palestinian from the West Bank, from Gaza Strip. And even Netanyahu have submitted to the minister, to the Knesset, to the ministerial cabinet, that a plan to annex the total of Gaza and gradually push the Palestinian into a ghettos-like corners where they can be either expelled out of the Gaza when there is a time permit that, and countries like Egypt or Jordan accept, or they can also force them to die by starvation and watching them dying. So I think these are the issues. No one in this world should always close their eyes. For the last 75 years, Israel have used the mass of deceptions to create, to victimize itself, that it is a victim in the region, while we all know that it is the creating of all the trouble. Unless and until we have a two-state solution, coexistence among Israel and the Palestinians, there is no solution to the crisis. You cannot expel 6.5 million Palestinians out of their countries because Israel wanted to have its own entity as a Jewish state in that region. Therefore, I think Hamas will accept any ceasefire, any sort of settlement, because it is no more Hamas-Israel fight. It is Israel against the Palestinians.
Dr. Awad, to finish our discussion, where does this go next? What is the next step with ceasefire talks breaking down, international condemnation seemingly having no impact on Israel's military goals, and a potentially worsening situation in Gaza?
Well, I think the ball in the court of the United States, President Trump, and even Prime Minister Netanyahu, who should also change his ambition toward the greater Israel in that part of the world and give the Palestinians some sense of breathing ground where they can survive, where they can start their own normal life. I think the international community has to apply pressure, especially at the UN Security Council, that there should be pressure from them. But however, it is still in the hand of Mr. Trump, who is even refusing to accept the two-state solution, or even recognizing a Palestinian state, where he said he is not a party with Macron or with the Prime Minister of Britain. So if he is not a party to UK and France, that means the war will continue and there is no question of any solution. So I think the American arms should be stopped, embargo should be imposed, and countries should apply sanctions on Israel if seriously we wanted to find a solution to the current crisis. But do they have the teeth to do that? I think we have to wait and watch.
Dr. Awad, thank you ever so much for your insights and your time. Of course, a difficult point of discussion, divisive, but an important one that must be had, and we will bring you all those updates from the ground and diplomatic efforts surrounding the war in Gaza. But we now move to a separate war in Europe. as Russian airstrikes on a prison and hospital in southeastern Ukraine have killed at least 19 people, including a pregnant woman and over a dozen inmates. That's according to Ukrainian officials. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accused Moscow of deliberately targeting civilian sites. Each such strike confirms pressure is necessary, he said, referring to growing calls for international sanctions. Let's listen to his full statement.
Кожен такий російський удар і російське хамство у відповідь на вимоги світу закінчити війну. Все це тільки підтверджує, що тиск потрібен. Більше санкцій потрібно проти Росії, стабільна підтримка України та нашого захисту життя, скоординована дипломатія заради миру. Я хочу подякувати всім, хто саме так працює разом з нами.
In Zaporizhia, a missile hit the Belenskiska penal colony, killing 16 prisoners and wounding over 40. Another strike hit a hospital in Dnipropetrovsk, killing 3, including a 23-year-old expectant mother, again according to local authorities. Russia denied targeting civilians, insisting its operations focused on military objectives. Here's what the Ukrainian president's condolence message said.
Важкий сьогодні день. В Запорізькій області було багато загиблих та поранених. Був удар російських бомб по виправній колонії. Росіяни знали, що це цивільний об'єкт, не могли не знати. 16 людей убиті цим ударом. Мої співчуття. Ще 43 людини були поранені. Жорстокий удар також був по місту Кам'янське, по території лікарні. 3 людини були убиті. І ще багато поранених. Наша Харківщина. Теж російські удари, теж втрати. Донеччина – щодня удари. Росія абсолютно не звертає уваги на всіх у світі, хто прагне закінчити цю війну. Тільки вчора була дуже потрібна заява президента Сполучених Штатів Америки Трампа. Багато підтримки у світі, але все одно обстріли та навіть показові вбивства росіянами наших людей.
Well, the attacks come just hours after US President Donald Trump issued a 10-day ultimatum to the Kremlin to end the war or face new punitive measures. This, of course, comes amid uncertainty over whether a peace deal will be made, but Donald Trump, US President, trying to put pressure on Vladimir Putin to agree to a ceasefire. A 30-day ceasefire, of course, has been floated by Ukraine and their Western allies for months. Initially, Trump gave a 50-day deadline, but that has now been shortened after Trump met with Starmer in Scotland, saying 10 to 12 days. It now has been confirmed that that is 10 days, and these strikes, of course, coming overnight yesterday. A further strike has been reported on a training camp, and we will bring you more information on that later when we have it. But moving on, US President Donald Trump has warned that new tariffs and sanctions on Russia could take effect in 10 days unless Moscow shows progress towards ending its war in Ukraine. Speaking aboard Air Force One, Trump said the following.
I said that.
Mr. President, yesterday you mentioned that you would change the Russia deadline to 10 to 12 days. Has that started yet, or when can we, see the official statement that that is the new deadline?
I'll tell you when. I'll give it to you now. Do you want a big scoop?
Yes, please.
Everybody else, close your ears, okay? You ready?
I'm ready.
10 days.
He also threatened secondary tariffs on countries that continue to buy Russian exports, including China and India. Trump, who's promised to end the war in Ukraine in a day, said he isn't worried about oil prices, vowing to boost US energy production. Well, joining us unfortunately, our guest is just joining, so we will wait for that. But of course, the US diplomatic efforts have been ongoing. An initial fallout in the White House between Donald Trump and Zelensky has, of course, led to a smoothing of relations. Trump and Zelensky meeting at the Pope's funeral in the Vatican, and further meetings taking place after that. The situation from the US seems to be one of wanting peace and placing pressure on Russia where possible. But of course, there is some sceptical aspect to this. Trump has changed his deadlines in the past, and his rhetoric on Russia and Ukraine has changed. So it is something that we will, of course, need to monitor. We are now joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao, a fellow at the Hudson Institute, joining us live from Tokyo, Japan. Dr. Nagao, thank you ever so much for joining us. I just want to hope that everybody that you know and love and wish all of Japan the best. Of course, after this news of the earthquake, and I hope that there is not too much tragedy and disaster. But let's focus now on Trump and moving this deadline to 10 days. He said 10 to 12 days in Scotland, but he's now given a strong 10-day sort of deadline for President Vladimir Putin to move towards a peace deal. Do you think that will have any impact on the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
Thank you very much about tsunami in Japan. Thank you very much about asking me. About the tariff, this is a big impact indeed, because it will affect the country who import something from Russia. So originally, the economic sanction against Russia is direct impact to Russia. But this time, this is not the direct impact. This is impact to the countries who import something from Russia. Because Russia's income rely on the buyers. So buyers of the Russian products. So that's why this is logical. But at the same time, it will affect a wider range of the countries. That is also true. So that's why this is a game-changing sanction if it will apply. So if once the country who imports something from Russia, they need to pay tariff. That is, it will happen, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
So
sorry, Dr. Nagao, we are out of time on that story. If you do stay with us very briefly, we're going to move on to another point, but thank you for those updates there. We will move on as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says that talks with China have been constructive, but any extension of the 90-day tariff truce will need the green light from President Trump. Speaking after 2 days of negotiations in Stockholm, Bessent said the meetings showed momentum, but added nothing is agreed until we speak with President Trump. The current truce, which paused tariff hikes in May, is set to expire on August the 12th. Without an extension, tariffs could snap back, with US goods already facing a 10% levy in China, and Chinese goods hit by an extra 30% in the US. Bessent noted that the US is not seeking a full decoupling, but rather a de-risk strategy for sectors like rare earth minerals, semiconductors, and pharmaceuticals. He also said talks touched on China's economic ties with Russia and Iran and existing agreements made by Trump and President Xi. While Bessent downplayed immediate risks of escalation, he stressed the final call remains with the president. Let's now listen in to what the trade representatives from both nations have said.
With respect to a potential pause, we're going to head back to Washington, D.C., and we're going to talk to the president about whether that's something that he wants to do. It's certainly something that's been under discussion, and so we'll brief the president on the outcome of this, and we'll see if there are any. We have further technical discussions that are happening right now as we speak among the teams, and so the president can make a final call on whether that's something that he wants to do.
当然，双方也就彼此的重要经贸关切进行了坦诚的沟通。
Of course, both sides also had candid exchanges over each other's major trade and economic concerns.
根据中美双方的共识，双方将继续推动美方已暂停的对等关税24%部分，以及中方反制措施，继续如期展期。
Well, we welcome Sharad Kohli, a senior economist, joining us live from New Delhi to briefly discuss these comments. Trump saying that he is making the final decision, or at least the US officials saying that Trump will make the final decision. Do you think that is the reality?
Good morning. I think there are three principal issues, if you see, between China and US trade deal. Issue number one is NVIDIA, you know, that there were some restrictions on export of those chips being exported to China. And whereas the tech companies are quite happy that the restrictions have been relaxed and the chips are back to being exported to China. But some of the political circles within the US, they are against it because you'll be arming you know, China on more tech grounds. They'll become more AI savvy. So which probably one lobby in the US doesn't want. That's first issue. The second issue between US and China is the rare minerals. I think with China placing restrictions, although some restrictions have been relaxed over the last few days, but then basic restrictions on import of rare minerals on which so many things depend, you know, that's the second issue. Third issue to my mind is the structural difference between the two economies. I think there is a bit of a lobby within the US. They say that the US economy is quite structurally different from Chinese economy. So it doesn't really make it a very smooth case of making a deal. But I'm sure some kind of deal will have to be reached because the total bilateral trade between US and China is more than $500 million. And most of it is import. $400 million plus is import from China. And there is so much of US economy which is dependent on Chinese products, from chemicals to fertilizers to garments to electronics. I think US will find very hard to say no to this deal because the volume of bilateral trade is very large. So I'm sure President Trump will be pragmatically thinking about what is to be done. And we might see some kind of a deal coming through. And we should not forget that China has also threatened US with reciprocal tariffs. So I think US may also face trouble if it doesn't get into this deal, apart from facing inflation, because a lot of Chinese goods being used by common man in the US are being imported from China.
Yes, absolutely. Sharad Kohli, I'm really sorry that we don't have more time. We have overrun on the programme, but thank you so much for your insight. That is all that we have time for now, but we will be back soon with more of your latest breaking international news and, of course, updates from that tsunami warning that has been issued to several regions. We'll be back soon.